The Council for Learning Outside the Classroom are a national charity set up in 2009 to ensure that every child has the opportunity to experience the world beyond the classroom walls as an essential part of their learning and development. So we support schools by helping them to integrate learning outside the classroom into the curriculum. So it's more than just a once-a-year school trip. It's something that's happening on a frequent, continuous and progressive basis. We have an accreditation for schools called CLOtC mark, which helps them to do that. And we also provide CPD and free online guidance for schools. As well as being the Chief Executive of the Council for Learning Outside the Classroom, I'm also a parent, a governor of a school, and I volunteer for the Scouts as well. When I'm out and about with my own children, I notice that the impact that visiting cultural venues or natural spaces has on them, has on their learning, has on their self-confidence. And I also notice when I'm out and about talking to teachers that in this day and age, not every child gets those opportunities. All the time I hear about children who've never visited the zoo, they've never been to the seaside, they've never been to a museum or art gallery. And I find that quite shocking in this day and age. 1 in 3 children in the UK have never built a sandcastle, and 59% have never visited a farm. So what motivates me is that I want every child to have these opportunities, and I think that accessing these opportunities through school is the way of achieving that. I think the venue where we are today, Safeside, is the ideal illustration of those aspects. It's part of the preventative programme of the West Midlands Fire Service, and it helps young people to learn in a controlled way about how to keep themselves safe around fire, water, road and the home. And it's an excellent example of how learning outside the classroom gives children the opportunities to learn about risk in the real world in a very controlled and safe way. The Learning Outside the Classroom Quality Badge is a national accreditation which recognises providers of school trips offering good educational quality and safety around their educational provision. So no matter what type of venue, if a teacher chooses a venue that holds the Learning Outside the Classroom Quality Badge, from a museum or art gallery through to an adventurous activity centre or a field trip overseas, they know that the safety and the educational quality is in place and that that's being checked by our assessors. It also looks at the safeguarding procedures as well. So it gives teachers assurance around the risk management process, and it also helps them to cut red tape. I think any teacher that puts their time and energy into organising school trips is a hero. But the types of hero that we recognise in our Learning Outside the Classroom Awards every year are people who go the extra mile to advocate for learning outside the classroom with their colleagues, convincing them of the benefits of taking children outside for learning, and also convincing their senior leaders and supporting their colleagues to develop confidence in taking children out and about. The other thing that I think really makes the difference are people who involve the young people themselves in the planning process, so that it's about collaborative learning, and I think that vastly increases the quality of experience for young people. The first thing is don't start your planning by doing a risk assessment. Learning should always be at the heart of the planning process. So think about what you're trying to achieve, what your learning objectives are, and what the needs are for your young people. So if you're taking children out bug hunting in the school grounds and it's taking you half a day to plan that experience, then that means that your risk assessment procedures aren't sensible or proportionate. So focus on real risks, not paperwork. The third thing is when you're doing a risk assessment, do it as a team. It shouldn't be a document that just sits on your server and no one ever looks at. And the best way of communicating that to everybody concerned, your staff and your volunteers, is to make sure that they're involved in the risk assessment process. I think it has changed. When we were set up in 2009 and the Learning Outside the Classroom Quality Badge was launched, schools were very concerned about risk and fear of litigation. And I think we've actually moved on quite a lot since then. Nowadays, when schools talk to us about the barriers of planning learning outside the classroom, it's very much around time and funding, and they are their considerations. Schools know that learning outside the classroom meets their priorities, but we need to do lots more work in trying to get that over to schools as much as we possibly can. Council for Learning Outside the Classroom is the lead organisation in the Learning Away consortium. Learning Away was originally an action research project which worked with 60 schools over a 5-year period, and it identified that residential experiences have massive impacts in terms of pupils' attainment, engagement in learning, relationships, and personal development and resilience. So we're trying to communicate that to schools through the Brilliant Residentials campaign. And we want schools to look at the resources on the Learning Away website, which not only talk to them about the benefits of residential experiences, but use the learning from the project to talk to schools about how they can get more value for money and more impact from those experiences. So I'd urge schools to look at the free resources on the Learning Away website. To teachers who are worried about the risks to themselves of taking children outside the classroom if something goes wrong, I would say to them that actually learning outside the classroom experiences are really safe. The everyday risks that children experience in their own homes or on the roads are actually far more significant than the risks they'll experience on a school trip. If you have put the time and effort into the planning process and you have sought the guidance of colleagues and experts in the field, you will find that it is very unlikely that something goes wrong. And even if it does go wrong and your actions are investigated, then you won't be held at fault. I think the first thing is teachers who don't think about the learning objectives and they don't derive the most benefit from the opportunities that they're providing. So that's a major piece of advice to schools. Don't just do what you did last year. Think about your learning outside the classroom as part of the whole programme of experiences you offer as a school, and think about how it integrates into learning back inside the classroom. The second mistake I think we see quite commonly is that schools don't evaluate their learning outside the classroom provision. And that is a problem because when they're trying to make the case for taking children outside the classroom again, it is a real advantage that they're able to talk to their senior leadership team about the benefits of that provision and the impact it's had in the past. The third mistake that schools sometimes make when they're planning educational visits is they're not always inclusive, and sometimes those opportunities are only offered to the children whose parents can afford it most. And I would say actually that's a great shame, because often the children that are going to benefit the most from those experiences are those disadvantaged students whose parents can afford it the least. I think it's important for two reasons. Firstly, it's important to the pupils. It's important that there is a link between what they've learnt on the visit and their learning inside the classroom. And that is really, really key because it can infuse their learning in the classroom, and you can really use that educational visit as a starting point to build on the pupils' skills and knowledge that they've learnt on the day. The other reason it's important is for the staff. And it's about part of evaluation really, that it's important that the schools come back, they reflect on what's gone well during the visit and maybe what's not gone quite so well, so that as a staff team they can learn from that and they can improve next time. In the future, we're going to continue to work with our partners to ensure that we achieve one voice for learning outside the classroom when talking to government and schools about its impacts and benefits. The second thing we're going to do is to work to ensure that there are more high quality CPD experiences for teachers and also student teachers to help them build their confidence and their competence in taking children outside the classroom. I think that's really key. The third thing we're going to do is work to strengthen the evidence and to communicate better the evidence that's already out there to convince more schools that they should be prioritising learning outside the classroom.